Now, as you know, our show here is all about finding unsung athletes and bringing you the sports that you probably haven't heard before. And today, we're going to learn about a new sport, like I said, because our special guest this week competes in dragon boat racing.
Now, I know what you're thinking. What actually is dragon boat?
I am thinking that.
Yeah, same. Dragon boat racing originated in China as a sport in 1976, but it has made it to the rest of the world, even right here in Queensland.
That's true. And Aiden Marcus is one of the athletes from the Brisbane Typhoon Dragon Boat Racing Club, which recently went to China for an international tournament.
And in a couple of days, being straight after off the plane in the Sunshine State, he joins us on the line right now. Aiden, thanks for coming on the show today.
G'day, fellas. James and Ruben. Pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the first question that everyone wants to know now is, what is dragon boat racing, mate? Can you explain it to us?
Okay, first and foremost, dragon boating is not rowing. It's not kayaking. So we get very offended if you actually call it one of those two things. So,
I'm glad you said that, because I remember the first time you told me, which was a few weeks ago, and you're like, I was like, is it canoeing?
That's how he explained it to me, Aiden.
And you were like, well, it's definitely not canoeing. So you're definitely right with that.
Yeah, it's not canoeing. But basically what it is, you've got a long boat which seats up to 20 people. And usually the races, they feature, men's categories, women's categories, mixed categories. You have a drummer at the front, a steer or oarsman at the back. And those are the two most important roles. The drummer's role is to keep the rhythm of the boat. They knock the drum or bang the drum, and they set the timing of the strokes. And then the oarsman at the back, their job is actually to steer the boat, which is a lot harder than it looks. And I was actually on the back of the boat at training the other week trying to learn this. But there are so many forces in the water that it takes a lot of skill, balance to be able to actually steer a boat. And especially when you have a boat full of 20 men, the power is incredible and it can easily knock you off the back. So there's a lot that goes into dragon boating, but the most important is timing. And you typically race over 500 metres, 200 metres, 2 kilometres, sometimes 3 kilometres. And for feature races and for one-offs, they sometimes do 10-kilometre races. So it's a lot of cardio, a lot of anaerobic as well, and a lot of strength and fitness and teamwork.
Nice. Yeah. Given it's a bit of an odd sport, how did you first discover dragon boat racing?
Yeah, mate, look, that was an interesting story because it goes back to my old man, my dad. So he tried to get me into it about, it'd have to be about 6 years ago now. And I resisted and I resisted and I resisted because I thought it was an old man sport. And then one day, it was actually when I came back from Canada, I had a bit of a snowboarding accident. My back was really messed up. And the physio suggested I get into a sport that could help build the strength. And Dad basically forced me down to Forest Lake, which was home to a club at the time called The Lake, as they're no longer there. But that's how I got stuck into it. And I quickly realized that it was actually a massive sport, particularly bigger among young people. Sadly, in Queensland, though, it's not as big among young people as it should be, which I find staggering, but it's huge among, in Victoria, Melbourne and Sydney. Those two places are a hive of activity for young people, and especially overseas in Canada, the US, the university teams over there. It's something to behold.
Yeah, right. So it kind of sounds like it is on the rise. Is there a reason why, a lot of people haven't heard of dragon boat racing before?
Mate, I've actually been scratching my head about this for the last few years because there's really no reason why it shouldn't be bigger than what it is. Like, as you guys mentioned, you'd never heard of dragon boating.
No.
I'd never heard of dragon boating up till 6 years ago. So it is a niche sport. I can't put my finger on it, guys. I think it might have something to do with the advertising of the sport. That's the best way I could put it. But you look at all of the water that we have out there, the rivers, the easily accessible rivers. The other thing is you only need a boat and a paddle to do it.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking, because there's all those other sports, like I know you don't want to be compared to them, but take, canoeing and kayaking and all that. They're pretty big because they're so simple, and so's this. Isn't that right?
100%. And the other thing is, it cost me about $150 for a full season.
Oh,
and
that's
about
pretty cheap.
That's pretty cheap.
Good.
That's good.
It's crazy. Yeah, and 100 of that goes to insurance. So it's one of the cheapest sports you can pay. And yeah, if you want to buy your own paddle, it's going to cost an extra. A top line paddle might cost you about $250, but you can easily pick them up for about $100. And usually clubs will have them have spares on hand. So you don't need to buy one to actually, compete. And it's one of the only sports as well that I know of where you can be sitting, next to your dad or your auntie, your uncle, your mum. It's a real family sport, while it still offers, the competitive aspects as well, where you can break off into your own age groups and compete. So it's a very special sport, I think.
Yeah. So have you ever? You said that your dad got you into it. Have you ever competed with your dad?
I have actually, and last year for the state championships was actually the first time that we've picked up a medal together. So it was a bronze medal, I think in the 500 metres from recollection, 500 or 200 metres, one of the two. And that was such a special moment. And I don't usually save all of my medals, but I've cherished that one. It's not every day you can say you're standing on the podium with your dad. It was
That's true.
a very special moment, yeah. And I think it's the sort of thing that I don't quite realise how special it is. And it's probably not something I'll appreciate until I'm older and I look back on it to realise how special that connection is to have.
Yeah, so you also mentioned it's a real family sport and you can be mixed and all that. Is that what's like the setup there when you have a bunch of different people in the boat? Does that make it harder?
No, it doesn't actually. I actually think it can boost a team because everybody has their strengths. And I think what the benefit of having a mixed boat of, men and women is that you can distribute the weight more evenly. Like dragon boating, you want to be balancing the boat. And sometimes what can happen is if you have a boat full of super, muscular guys, it can actually slow you down. So there's opportunity there to have all different kinds of weights and fitness levels, all contributing to the one goal of getting across that finish line. But the most important thing is timing. So you'd be surprised. You can actually have a boat that might have, 4 or 5 men and 6 women, and you can still beat the top teams if your timing is where it needs to be. That's the key.
So it's a very even playing field then, because it's not all about, strength then. It's more about that technical side and the timing of it, like you said.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. Like you could have a team that is full of brute strength, but if they don't know how to use that strength in the boat and push the water back effectively, they'll be shown up. Like their pants will be down around their ankles. I'm telling you, it's happened plenty of times before where you have these really muscular people who jump into a dragon boat and they realise it's actually really difficult.
Yeah. So you said before, you'd been doing some training at the back of the boat, actually. So what actual role do you play in the boat?
Yeah, so I sit a number of positions. So the boat itself is broken down into, your strokes at the front. They set the tempo along with the drummer. Then you have your engine room, and you have your people at the back. And actually, the people at the back probably have the most important role because they're trying to get on top of all of the really messy water that's being pushed back from the front of the boat. So those are your 3 sections in the boat. And you sort of swap around. Like I've paddled at the front, I paddle in the middle, and I've also paddled in the back. So it really depends on, in any given race or regatta, how you're balancing the boat, where the coach needs to, they might have to distribute the weight differently. It could also depend on your race plan as well. Like depending on whether you're trying to focus on getting a really strong start, you might put your bigger guys at the front, or you might shift them back so the boat sits up a bit more and rides a bit more of a wave. There's just so much that goes into it that it is a bit of an art, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of thinking behind it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of thinking, a lot of strategy as well that goes into it, and even sort of matching up against other teams too. There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah. So do you have a preferred role?
Not really. I don't. It's just wherever the team needs you. And it's the one sport as well where I don't think there's any stars. You can't have a star in the team. It's just so important in dragon boating to be working as a unit, because as soon as one person gets out of time, that just stuffs up your whole race. So that's what I love about it, is that there isn't room for egos at all.
Yeah, nice.
You've got to be standing as one.
Okay. So also we mentioned in the intro there that you recently went to China. Can you tell us about that?
Okay. China was incredible for a couple of reasons. Now, just for a bit of background, dragon boating is a professional sport in China, and they often pay their athletes. So for us, we do it socially, but what's incredible about it is that a lot of the Asian places, we're talking about China, Singapore, they'll actually pay clubs to come over. So for us, they invited us, and we've been over there a couple of times now. It was my first, but as a club, we've been there a couple of times. And they paid for our accommodation and our food while we're over there with these delectable buffets, and all we had to pay for were our flights. So we were over there from the 7th of September to the 14th, competing in Qingpu province, and I'm sorry if I butchered that name, but it was set in this ancient water town, and honestly, guys, it was the most incredible experience, just being there with 20 other teams from around the world: Russia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Canada, Singapore. There was another team from Australia there too. It was just such an extraordinary experience, and coming up against the likes of, the Philippine Air Force team, which are world-renowned. They've won, numerous world championships. That was pretty special and something that I'll always remember.
Yeah, so were you guys competing? Was it like a tournament there?
Yeah, so it was the 12th International Invitational Regatta, and the way they broke it down was they had the local competition featuring, the top flight Asian teams, like Chinese Taipei was one of them, and then you had the invitational international teams, of which there were 20, and we competed in that sort of division.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's how it worked, and it was over 3 days, and they had 500-meter races and also the 3-kilometer race, which wove in that ancient city of Yuzhijiao, I believe it's called.
Yeah. So we've previously spoken on the podcast. We've talked about sports that we'd like to see in the Olympics. Would you think that dragon boat racing would ever be in the Olympics?
Mate, I'd love it to be, and I don't think there's any reason why it shouldn't be. Honestly, I just can't pick why a sport, and there's no disrespect to anybody who plays esports, but I just don't understand how a sport like that can get, so much attention in the Olympic space, yet you have sports like dragon boating that just aren't getting it. And I actually spoke to someone who specialises in Olympic qualifications from the University of Queensland, and they were saying that a lot of it comes down to the ability of a sport to make money, and also its ability to gain traction among younger people.
Okay, so viewership as well.
Yeah.
So viewership comes into it, and it's also got to have one undisputed governing body, and I think it might have been with boxing or wrestling. I need to go back and research that one, but a while ago when one of those sports was going for Olympic contention, I think there was a dispute between the governing bodies over who owned the sport, and that was a roadblock to actually getting it into the Olympics initially. And I think you're finding that's a similar thing that could happen with dragon boating, where you have paddle. There's a branch of it called the World Paddle Association, I think, and then also the International Dragon Boat Federation, and they're in this unofficial war over the sports, over who owns the sport, and I think that's what could hold it back a little bit. And then you obviously have the viewership as well, the participation numbers in Australia as well. Those aren't probably where they need to be. But, mate, it's a global sport. It's played everywhere.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It sounds like everyone's got at least some form of a dragon boating team.
Well, yeah, and you can just pick you can pick 10 or 15 of your mates up, or even just fewer than that. You can get 3 of your mates together, and, someone might know another 3 mates, and suddenly you have a team of 10.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take much, and it doesn't take much to actually do quite well if you have a base level of fitness. But I would like to add to that too, that it does cater for all levels of fitness. You don't have to be, at the gym every day. You can take it as seriously or as or as socially as you'd like.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so yeah. What were you going to say?
Oh, but I would just love it to be an Olympic sport. The spectacle of dragon boating, seeing the teams racing against each other, the nail-biting races, it's honestly such a spectacle, and I wish there would be more attention for it. It deserves it. It has all of the characteristics of what you need to have a sport that's perfect for TV, that can be participated in by many people, and that's got a true worldwide following.
Well, we'll start the push right here, Aiden. The dragon boat racing for the Olympics.
Yes, mate. Please do. We need more support. Yeah, that would be great, guys.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, I feel like I'm a dragon boat racing expert now.
I've definitely learned more, that's for sure.
Yeah,
it's not canoeing, that's what I...
Yeah, exactly.
It's not canoeing, guys. It's not rowing. It's dragon boating or paddling.
Let's go. All right. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Aiden, and telling us all about dragon boat racing. We really appreciate it.
James and Ruben, it's a pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me and taking the chance to learn a bit about our sport. We love it, and we hope that we can get more people doing it. There's plenty of clubs around Brisbane, and there's even some out of Ipswich and Logan. So if you're out there, come on down and join us.